All right, guys, Nick Drossos, and welcome to another episode of the Warrior Mindset Podcast. And today, I think one of the toughest topics to talk, to teach about is domestic violence because there's so many layers when I've trained and worked with women who were in relationship or past relationships. And most of the cases, like I said, who were in them, still living them and wanting to learn self-defense at the same time. And I brought expert here, Tim Muehlhoff, who will be talking about de-escalating and understanding the psychology of domestic violence. So Tim, thank you for coming on the show. You could present yourself.
Well, Nick, thanks for having me on. I'm a huge fan of what you do. I'm actually going to be coming in Montreal.
Yes.
Level 1 instructor training.
I can't wait for that. That's going to be awesome.
You have to promise me some good Greek food. You have to.
I give you my word. I'll take you to the best Greek restaurant in Montreal.
Love it. Well, let me introduce myself to your listeners. I'm a professor of communication at Biola University. It's a small university outside of Anaheim, California. My PhD is in conflict resolution, how to de-escalate conflict. But I also just got my black belt in Shaolin Kung Fu 3 weeks ago.
How many years of training was that?
What's that?
How many years of training did you do for that?
7 years.
7 years. Good.
7 years before I could snatch the pebble, Nick. It took me 7 years before I could.
I think it's important for people who want to learn martial arts, self-defense, or even teach, that it's years of training and practice, and there's a certain amount, a good amount of dedication and passion that has to be to do this. So
I've taken both, and now I teach at domestic violence shelters in Orange County, California, how to verbally defend yourself and how to physically defend yourself if it comes to that. And I'm also on the board of directors of the Graceful Warrior Project. That we go to the hot spots of the world, like the Congo, the rape capital of the world, and we teach women verbal and physical self-defense, as well as work with couples and just give them strategies of how to de-escalate tension. So my wife and I are going next summer for 3 weeks to the Congo to work with women to help them verbally de-escalate.
So, I've worked with women. I'm going to share a quick story without making it too long. It's a really sad story. It was a woman who had reached out to me last year, and she was in a domestic abusive relationship, and she kept writing me, "Can you give me self-defense tips? I'm watching your videos." And then she reached out to me, and then she finally managed to leave him. Then she was planning to go back, and then I kind of told her, "Do you want to go back and restart? It took you so much courage to get out of this." Then he tried to track her. He was arrested. Finally, she went into a sort of depression, and finally she took her life. And I was devastated, Tim. I mean, I sat when I found out because a friend went in her account and contacted me, and I said, "Please call me." And I was like, I was on the verge of tears. I was so bottled, and I felt so guilty. I called my girlfriend, and then I called one of my best and closest friends, Helen Stranzel, who teaches women self-defense for 20 years and has worked closely with women. Because there's sometimes from women to women, it's easier for them to open up and talk about it. And she told me, "Nick," because I felt guilty. I felt like I didn't do enough. I should have done more. I should have, and I was like, and I beat myself to a point that, for a few days, I couldn't sleep. I felt so guilty, like I failed her. And it took some time for me to realize there's only so much I could have done, especially being so far away. So, you know what I mean? And I've had women literally call me and say, "Nick, I want to take self-defense classes. My husband beats me. I need to learn how to fight." And I'm like, how you're going to go to bed with this guy at night? How much self-defense can I teach you? So it's such a tough one. And thank you for coming on the show, because there's full of gray zones when it comes to teaching that, because every situation is different. So what can you bring to help women who are in it, instructors like me and other instructors who are faced with this type of, this type of situation and what to do?
Well, let me just say that the first thing I would say to your listeners is you're not alone. Tragically, you're not alone. A lot of women are shamed because they think, well, I'm the only marriage that my husband calls me derogatory names or beats me. And let me just share some quick statistics, Nick, that come from police departments around the United States. Over 3 million women annually assaulted by the relational partner in the United States. Battery is the single largest cause of injury to women, more frequent than auto accidents, muggings, and rapes combined.
Wow.
Is battery by a relational partner. Women in the US are 9 times more danger in their own homes than they are in the street. And then just add a COVID note, we've seen an increase, a 25% increase of calls to police stations or domestic violence hotlines about domestic violence. So I just want to say to your listeners, there's a shaming factor that happens when it's like, I can't conceive that I'm in a marriage where I get hit or a relationship. Just know you're not alone. And tragically, this is happening to a lot of women across the United States. So you're not to blame. It's not your fault. A lot of women are experiencing, unfortunately, what you're experiencing. So that shaming factor really shouldn't happen with women. And let me just say, 5%, it is women to men. But again, and these are US statistics, Nick. So in the US, it's literally 95% male to female, but that 5% is real. It is the female to male, and I don't want to discount that.
I'm going to share a story later on about a relationship I was in that did turn physical towards me. And it took a lot of courage for me to open up, and it took years. I'm not scarred by it, but it was a learning lesson that I think a lot of people can get out of, whether you're male or female, understanding the it was the first time I experienced it, and I learned a lot from it, and I was able to use what I learned to teach women the idea that just get up and leave, call the cops, just there's a lot of other things that keep you tangled where you just can't get up, pack your stuff, and leave. But I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, because I think I want to, cover that for the listeners and the viewers as well. So I'll let you continue.
So we know in self-defense that you have to do situational awareness, right? Should I do that cut through to an alley that's only partially lit? And so we just make a quick determination of whether that's good or not. We call that situational awareness. We need to have relational awareness. We need to understand the person I'm talking to, what is the threat level? So we have to ask 3 different questions. First, is the person upset, and do I have a good relationship with them? Because Nick, you're in a dating relationship, right? Yes. I've been married 30 years, and being upset is just part and parcel of marriage. It's just part of being in a relationship. So if you have a good relationship and the person is upset, well, then by all means, have that conversation. Talk about what's causing you to be upset. That might be the kid's schedule. It might be because of COVID-related things, like a sudden decrease of finances, and we're all cooped up with each other. So yeah, if the person's just upset and you have a good relationship, then by all means, have the conversation. But the second level is, this person is angry, and then I want to ask, what is our relationship like? Because like, Nick, let's say you and I were, we co-taught together, and we had a good relationship. But something happened that we were mad at each other. So maybe in our anger, it wouldn't be good to have this conversation right now. Like maybe we should just go off and cool off a little bit. Now, the third level is this person is enraged. Like we're to the point where blows are going to be thrown. This person is using derogatory language. So the de-escalation techniques I'm going to teach work for sure for the first one, if you're upset. Second, I think they even work if they're angry, but if we're at the explosion stage, we are past verbal de-escalation, and you need now to adopt a strategy of getting out of the room safely. And I can offer some verbal techniques to do that, but you're going to react negatively to them because it's like, well, I'm not going to admit to being that. I'm not going to admit to being stupid. I'm not going to cop to that. Well, yeah, but your goal in the enraged stage is to get out of the room.
See, I won't lie to you. I know me. I think at some point I might have a hard time. I'm being honest, only because I would hate to admit I'm wrong if I'm, if I'm wrong. But I also see the point that at that enraged stage, the person's actually not even listening to what you're saying. And no matter what you say, doesn't change anything. It's no different than when I see self-defense, and I've seen guys, fight outside the club or about to get into a fight where they're just yelling. They've got to the stage where I know they're going to fight. There's no point of even trying to diffuse or de-escalate.
Yeah. So let's talk about the cycle of violence real quick, Nick. This is very common language in people who talk about domestic violence. So the cycle of violence is this. The first stage is what we call the tension stage, right? Things are happening financially because of COVID, or you're just having relational issues. And so the tension is building for this one person, okay? The next stage is what we call the explosion stage. This could be verbal abuse, emotional abuse, or physical abuse, but there's an explosion, and that man grabs you, throws you against the wall, grabs you by the hair, calls you derogatory names, threatens your life. That's the explosion stage. Now, what's next is what we call the remorse stage. Studies show that most men will then experience a certain level of remorse after they've done this, right? So then they'll come to you and they'll apologize. They'll say they're sorry. They promise it'll never happen again. And then you get the honeymoon stage, where we actually see men will give gifts to their girlfriends. They'll be super nice. They'll take the initiative around the house. Now, it's really important to know where you are in the cycle of violence. If you're in the tension stage, this is the time to de-escalate as much as humanly possible. When the explosion stage happens, you need to get safe and defend yourself. When the honeymoon stage comes, now we need to have a talk about what just happened. To say, hey, we need help. We need to go see a marriage counselor. We need some help here because you really scared me. You hurt me, and we need help. Now, I would never fault a woman for leaving after one explosion stage, Nick. Women don't need to go through the cycle twice. I would not fault any woman, and I would even encourage some women, if he has his hands around your neck, if he threw you against the wall, if he punched you, I'm saying I think you get out of there.
Out. Immediately, I agree.
Out. So we need to know where we are in the stage of where we can have a conversation with a person, and what type of conversation.
I think what's amazing, Tim, and your expertise and what you're sharing here right now, to me, is so valuable, because you're giving a reference to the women who are watching this video, and because you need to know where are you at and what strategy needs to be applied. Absolutely. If you use your de-escalation tactics in the enrage, that it's not happening. Are you, when you're in the honeymoon phase, are you going, oh, like it's okay, I forgive you, I'm sorry what you did, and then the cycle repeats itself, right? And that cycle is important for women to know, to be able to communicate, and as well they start being aware of when is it going to happen again and again, because I could assure you it does happen again and again. And I don't know if maybe I'm going to share a little bit of my experience. Every time they explode, it's never their fault. They explode because I remember it's because of you. I exploded because you made me mad. You brought this out of me. That's not, it's like, no, it's clearly, you can't blame me for the way you're reacting. It doesn't make any sense. Right. And I think that there's also a blame. There's also a shame. There's also, from my perspective or the woman's perspective, where we feel that we're doing something wrong. We need to work on something. There's a psychological game as well that's played there from the abuser.
So, Nick, what a great point to make. And we know that abusers often isolate their victims. So suddenly you're not allowed to hang out with your friends. Suddenly there's no spending money that you can go and do stuff. So, Nick, after a while, a woman can actually come to believe it is my fault. I should have kept the house cleaner. I should have taken care of the kids. The kids were too loud. That was my fault. Dinner wasn't ready at 5 o'clock. That's my fault. But when you're in community, another person looks at you and says, hey, that is not your fault. Everybody at dinner's late. And in most relationships, you don't get hit for that. So let me recommend to everybody that they need to get information, and please use a computer outside of your house in case your spouse looks at your computer and sees where you're going.
Well
So
said.
I would encourage everybody to go to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence website, which is simply ncadv.org.
I'll put that link on the comment box if you're watching the video, so you can go straight there.
Because women need information, and they need deprogramming, right? Like this one woman was told repeatedly, you're a horrible driver. You're the worst driver in the world. You are a menace to people. You're going to kill somebody. You're the worst driver in the world. She heard it for years, Nick. A friend of hers said this to her. It was brilliant. She said, okay, show me all your tickets. If you're the worst driver in the world, I assume you have tickets galore. Show me tickets. The woman looked at her with tears in her eyes and said, I've never received a ticket. And the friend said, that's because you're not a bad driver. But Nick, if we don't have that outside voice, then women and men start to believe these negative narratives, and you start to think, no, it is my fault. I don't even need to get help because I'm the problem. I just need to do better. And podcasts like this, Nick, hopefully sound the alarm. It's not, nobody deserves to be hit.
I think one of the things that needs women, and I say there's a level of, you need to value yourself and respect yourself. And there's a level of somewhere along the line, maybe what you've been through as a child, past experience, there's a lack of confidence where you say, I don't deserve this. And one of the biggest mistakes I've learned is you see the red flag and you push it out of the way. And we give people benefit of the doubt. Oh, she only snapped once, or he only snapped once. Oh, he didn't mean it. Oh, it was because I did this. But let me tell you, and I again, whether it's male or female, the psychology of breaking somebody down, as I call it, doesn't change that much. Because what you're saying is a little bit what I lived with. And it was a slow isolation at the beginning, and maybe I'm wrong. These people are amazing. They are, because they want to throw the net and trap you. They're great. You're like, wow, they're amazing, right? The first 3-6 months until they get you to a certain position. And then I believe they start breaking you down slowly with so I tell people the first red flag, if your husband or wife just says, you're such an idiot, just shut up. Yeah. First red flag. There's normally that turns into that, to you're stupid, to F you, to you know what, to slamming the doors, to pushing, to shoving, to threatening, to hitting. There's a buildup. People need to be aware. Women need to be aware of that and to cut it instantly and not be afraid. Here's the thing, what I believe, and I spent 20 years, I say this openly, I spent 20 years with a therapist and a coach because I didn't have an easy upbringing. I didn't have the most loving parents. They were not bad, but they had very hard lives. So I was raised very hard. I had to work at 13. I had to leave my school, high school, at 16 and got kicked out of school and had to go work. So I had a hard life. And because of it, I believe when I look back, I had a certain amount of lack of love. So I would settle with anybody who would love me no matter what. And I would force to make it work. And today I say to myself, no, I'm at a point now that I learned to say, you know what? I respect myself enough and I'm not lowering or settling for what, quote unquote, they tell you, well, that's what relationships are. I'm like, no. The moment you swear, hey, disrespect, you should value and respect yourself and say, you know what? I'm done. The first time you might warn the person, say, you know what you did was, it's not my values. It's not what I want in a relationship. The second time they do it again, they're basically telling you, I don't respect you enough, or I'm going to slowly break and impose what I want. And then there's a buildup to that. So men and women, and obviously mostly women, they need to cut that out right away and, set the tone right away, or else the person will take advantage of that situation and build it from there. That's just my experience. Maybe I'm
Oh, totally.
right. It's just
Nick, I totally agree. And let's take it from the abuser's perspective. So we know 85% of abusers have seen it growing up. So they've seen their dad abuse their mom, and 85% of people who've been abused, this is what they grew up with. So let me just say this. We're obviously talking to different people on this podcast. If we're talking to married people, that's one thing. If you're living together, it's more complicated. But let's just talk to the dating people real quick, Nick, to talk about your point. Listen, when you're dating, this is one big audition, right? It's one huge audition.
wow. Sorry, I'm cutting you off. It's an audition.
It is.
That is the best. Every woman right now,
it is.
Print this. It's in audition.
And you want to see that person, in stressful situations. You want to see them when the chips are down in the midst of COVID. You want to see them hard because, listen, in my personal opinion, if that man calls you a derogatory name in anger, if he ever pushes you, if he ever puts his hands on you in anger, if you ever wonder, wow, if I didn't do what he asked me to do, what would he have done to me? The day relationship is over. It's like over. You just saw your future.
You know what? And I'm going to share a little bit my experience because, I've been married, I've been divorced, I've made some pretty bad choices. And today I could look back and say, wow, I learned a lot from them. And today it's been a year I'm with my girlfriend. And it's interesting because we've maybe argued twice and it was very, oh, you know what you did? I didn't like that. Oh, I really am sorry. I didn't realize that would bother you. She goes, yeah, I don't like it for these reasons. I'm like, shit, I'm sorry. I'm going to work on it. Make sure I don't do it again. Right. That was it. That was all. And I see the difference of being in a mature, because that's what it is, a mature relationship where you could communicate and respect each other. And I was like, wow, I look back and it's like, how did I settle? How was I trying to, and I'm going to share one last thing. And this is very important. People ask me, Nick, because people always come to me for relationship advice. Even though I got divorced, I've had many failed relationships, but I know what it takes to not make it work, and I know what it takes to make work. Yeah. And I said, the key to a good and happy relationship, first, like this is you, that's me or Tim or whoever's watching, and this is the other person that you're gonna work with, right? Because you're a team. The key here, it's not the relationship that's gonna make you guys together. It's first you need to find a good, kind, caring, loving, respecting person. Look, how do they treat other people around you? How do they treat their family, their friends? How do they talk about others? How do they treat the waiter, the busboy, the homeless guy? Are they judgmental? And first you need to find the right partner and then create the right relationship.
Absolutely. So
people tend, I got into, relationships where my friends were like, what are you doing, bro? And I was like, oh, she's not that bad. We're going to work on it. But it's impossible because just her character and her personality didn't at all value what I valued or match mine. So I think that's a really important part when you decide to pick a partner. And when I look at my girlfriend, it's not even in her vocabulary to scream, swear, and talk in a profound way. So there's a very peaceful and harmony feeling to our life, which I've never experienced. And I had to, one last thing, and I had to break the vicious cycle. I was in a vicious cycle, right? A vicious cycle that I'm very aware of today, repeating what I went through with my mother.
Yeah.
And say, you know what? I'm not going to accept somebody swearing at me, yelling at me, disrespecting at me, and me being fueled up, right? Trying to defend myself. Yeah. It was like, today it took me many years, mature enough to say, sorry, this is over for me. It's not my value. It's not what I want in a relationship. Maybe that's your definition, and that's great. Maybe some person will like that wild fighting, and then you guys could have that makeup sex, as they call it. But for me, it's not what I want.
Right. So just two quick comments. One, to be in that cycle, you need outside perspective. So for you as a therapist, It could be friends who step in and say, bro, you're dating the same woman over and
And
over and
over.
over and over. It's not good. But sometimes we're blind to that. We just
Yes.
don't see that. That's where community comes in. But let me just make one quick comment based on marital research. So, Nick, it is great that you and your girlfriend don't argue and that you've had like 2 arguments in a year. That's awesome. But know that the research shows if you do argue but do it well, that is a total indicator of marital happiness. So
Yeah.
I don't want listeners to think, well, crud, we do argue a lot. But listen, if it's healthy and you get things resolved, arguments are not an indicator of marital
No.
unhappiness. It can be marital health.
Absolutely. And what I'm trying to say when I said that is we haven't, it hasn't happened. I'm sure it is, but we're both mature enough to know that I'm very pragmatic and solution oriented. So it's like, what's the problem? This is the problem. What's the solution? This is the solution. What do I need to work on? What do you need to work on? Okay, good. Let's work on it.
Yep.
Like, I don't believe in just repeating the problem over and over and yelling and screaming. It doesn't solve anything. So I'm like, okay. And I was like, okay, what's the problem? Let's fix it. But the reality, most people don't know how to fix it. That's why they're trying to just shit on you all the time or try to put you down.
Yeah.
Because the reality, they don't have the awareness or the consciousness or the accountability to say, okay, I really want to work on this.
Yeah.
So I
Right,
think
Nick.
I think that when we're looking at domestic violence, and I'm going to say one last thing. I know I'm talking a lot about, maybe because I'm getting passionate about it. The idea that you're just going to walk out or you're just going to call the police, right? I looked at it as a male's perspective, where I had my other house, I had my business. I could have just walked out, but we had just moved in an apartment. We had rented a place. There was kids involved too, where you're like, okay, do I take my son and what do I do in this situation? Where am I going to move now? So I was in a position where I remember being in that room and she's pushing me, challenging me to fight, slamming the door. And like, she wanted to fight. And I'm thinking like, and she knows very well what I do. Right. So I know that if I snap, you know what I mean? And obviously, thank God, I'm very controlled and disciplined because of my years of training. I left the house, but I knew that's it. It's time for me to pack my stuff and leave.
Yeah.
But even then, it wasn't as easy. Let me take my bags and let me leave. Right. You still have to plan. What do I tell my son? Where do we move? Oh, my apartments are rented. There was still some planning needed to do. So I could just imagine when other women tell other women, well, just leave him. There's a lot more in there. So for women sometimes who put that pressure on other women, be there to support and help and say, how can I help you? So we could figure out what you need to do to get away from this relationship.
And Nick, let me just say this about the leaving stage. So police will tell you, I interviewed police. I wrote a book on marriage forecasting, but in it, the police officer said, people get hurt when they leave. So you have to have a leaving strategy. Like literally, when are you going to physically leave with the kids? When are you going to pack up to leave, right? You're going to start to look at your finances and protecting your finances to leave. So if you're going to leave, again, go to the domestic violence hotline and they will give you strategies of how to safely leave. Like sometimes police will literally come and help a woman leave in case the husband comes home from work or he's got an idea that this is going to happen. So I just want to say to your listeners, leaving, absolutely, but it's not as easy as, hey, screw you, I'm walking out the front door. But that would be really bad advice because he could be enraged and try to stop you. And now you're in a physical altercation.
Or even turn around and try to the police right there, picking up the phone and trying to call the police.
Absolutely. So just have a strategy and just know there's a ton of resources for women out there. We've given one website, but if you just do a Google search, there are a ton of great organizations that will actually help. And you can talk to live people. There's hotlines everywhere that women can call and get personal advice confidentially. So leaving is, if you need to leave, by all means leave, but do it safely and learn what that means to do it safely.
And, in the cases where I have, worked with women who manage to leave, they have the habit of leaving and then going back.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm always like, you did all this work. We want to go back and restart the process. But I get it in their head because they're trying to go back thinking, maybe now he's going to understand that I'm serious.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's going to get, I'm really serious. I'm really going to leave him next time. Now he's going to be serious. He's going to be better or nicer to me.
Yeah.
But unless the abuser gets help, which most of the cases, they don't. In most cases, they don't, because what they're going to do is just move on. They're going to do whatever they can to get you where they want. And once they lose you, they will move on to the next, as I call them, prisoner, the next captive.
Yeah. Let me hit you with some more statistics about that, Nick. So listen to this. Only 9% of women suffering from assault by their partner call the police. Only 9%. In addition, only 8% of abused women press charges against their partner, and 72% of this small percentage end up dropping the charges. So look, people don't go through with it.
When I was, working with that girl, she wrote to me. She goes, "Should I drop the charges? They're going to put him in prison." And I was like, "What do you think's going to happen? He's just going to come back. Like, why? Because they feel guilty." But at the end, your life is at risk, whether you put him in prison or not. If his intention is to come back, he will come back, because there's a psychological mindset where he feels he owns you. You're his property. I'm going to come get you. And there's also a twisted part in this where I've actually heard he does it because he loves me. He hits me because he loves me. He hits me because he cares about me so much. And it's like, no. So there's so many factors in this.
So when we talk about de-escalation, we have to say, what stage of the cycle of violence are you currently in? So let's go to the very first part of it. Tension is building, but the violence hasn't happened yet. So that's where we need basic conflict resolution skills 101, right? So when we go to the Congo, we're actually going to meet with couples to say, okay, so when you have a disagreement, when tension starts to rise, like, how do you handle it? What's your strategy? What tools do you have in the toolbox? Most couples, Nick, don't have any tools in the toolbox to resolve it. So in the tension stage, you just want to sit down and say things like this. Okay, I know things are busy for you at work. I know financially we're facing a lot of unexpected pressures with COVID-19. I know the kids aren't going to school. They're home 24/7. We're all tired. What can I do to help lower the tension in your life? And then maybe your spouse says, okay, well, this drives me crazy, honey. I come home, I'm tired, and I just want dinner. I just want, right? Okay, so, okay, I can do that. That's a small fix, okay? Now, she's tired, she's frazzled, and in a good relationship, he would turn around and say, okay, honey, what can I do to lower the tension for you? But you can't expect that to always happen. So in the tension stage, do what you can do to reasonably lower the tension. Okay, now if he says to you, I just don't want to see you when I get home from work. I don't want to hear you. I don't want to see you. Well, okay, that's not reasonable. And it shows that you're not dealing with a reasonable person. But in the tension stage, let's try to reduce tension as much as reasonable. When the explosion stage comes, this is when you and I would say you're in a fight.
You're in a fight.
But your job is to get out safe with the kids. And I don't care what you have to do to get out of that room safe with the kids. So I would say in that explosion stage, you're not having a rational conversation with that person, right? They're calling you names. Do not resist the name. They're saying, you don't do one dang thing around this house. My students at Biola University go, well, that's not true. No. Wrong stage to do that. This is the explosion stage. You say, my bad, I could do better.
I'm hearing you. I get it. And you're right.
Yep.
You're right. You're so right. It's hard because then you're admitting you're wrong. But I understand when it comes to, I'm looking at it from a man's perspective, but from a woman's perspective who just needs to get out and get safe. It's like, okay, dear, I'm so sorry. Take the kids. Boom, you're out.
So Nick, let's take this into a self-defense physical situation. You're outside a bar and there are three guys semi-drunk, and one guy looks at you, Nick, and says to you, what's that stupid look on your face? What kind of idiot are you looking at me like that? And you're thinking, here's three semi-drunk guys, and two of them are pretty big. What would your advice be to you in that situation?
See, the reality, it'd be like, oh man, sorry, man. I was spaced out if I was looking at you, and walk away. Now,
Nick, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Is you just kind of you admitted it,
yeah,
and got out safe. That's all I'm advocating.
And I teach that, and you're absolutely right. I mean, in the street, keep your ego in check because you don't know. Now, if they walk towards me and I feel that something might happen, then then I would definitely have to strike. But that's completely different, right? If the person comes into your range, threatens, maybe has a weapon, or thinks something is going to happen, that's a completely different game.
Yeah, if during the explosion stage he cuts off your exit, right, you're stuck in the corner.
Very well said.
He's coming at you like this. I mean, Nick, I love your videos. We're saying you don't get a free punch.
No.
I'm going first.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
And that's all. That's what I'm advocating in these situations. Is let's try to verbally get out of the room. And then, by the way, you're out of that room. You're to a neighbor's house. You're in your car getting out. You're calling the police. You are not walking back into that room. And by the way, if you felt that endangered and threatened and he hit you, listen, you're not going back into that marriage relationship until that guy gets healthy, if ever.
If ever. Yeah.
But now let's go to the next stage. This is the remorse stage, right? He comes back and he says, listen, I'm really sorry, man. I lost it. Things at work were so crazy, and I'm just this and that. Okay, now we're back to the let's have a conversation. And here's the conversation. Listen, you hurt me. I was fearful for my life and for the kids. We need help. So what are we going to do to I know you're sorry right now, okay? And I appreciate you saying that. But you can really help me by let's get help. Oh. And if he refuses, Nick, I think we're out of there. We're out of there.
I completely agree.
And then the honeymoon stage is, let me get your roses instead. Honey, let's go on this great vacation together. It's like, no. Honey, thank you for thinking of that. I want to affirm him. But listen, what I really want is we need help. We need to go see a therapist.
It's funny. It's funny, Tim, because you talk about those stages, and as you're talking, I see them all in my head, and they play it out exactly like that. And I think, I think it's human behavior manipulation. I think it's the strategy an abuser will use, and we're talking about physical, but it could be emotional, verbal, and the same cycle could repeat itself, right? Maybe he's never going to get, or she's going to get to the point where he's going to hit you, but he's going to get to a point where he's always swearing, breaking you down, making you feel, oh, I'm so sorry, I love you, let's do this, and then it repeats itself. So I think this is everybody should know these stages, and know how to use each stage and how to communicate and know what verbal strategy or tactic I need to use at the right stage. And I think this is the first time I know them, but it's the first time I've seen them and heard them broken down like this. And I think this is unbelievable information. So
can I recommend a book real quick?
Yes.
Nick? So Patricia Evans, and again, maybe you can link this at the end. Patricia Evans wrote a book called The Verbally Abusive Relationship, How to Recognize It and How to Respond to It. And it is the seminal book on verbal abuse. We've talked a lot about physical abuse. So it's just Patricia Evans. You can get it on Amazon. So we'll link that. And then again, the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence is just simply nencadv.org. So get information to recognize these things, and Patricia gives you strategies of how to respond to a verbally abusive person.
You'll send me those links. We'll put them in the comment box. And one last thing before we go. People need to understand that verbal abuse is as serious and as damaging, and in some cases worse than physical abuse. Because you could take a punch in the face, you can get hit. That scar is going to heal, right? But verbal abuse, breaking you down on a regular basis, to me is the worst. And I lived it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you know, without saying much, my mom was a very unstable woman
Mm.
growing up.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of medication, manic depressive, borderline, and it was her character.
Yeah.
It was, it's like, you're dumb, you're stupid. I regret you were born, and like verbal. And I'm so sorry. I love you. I'll never do it again. And the cycle just repeated
Yeah.
almost daily as a child. Right. So when I look back, I can see why I attracted these type of relationships. And it was a lot of hard work for me to break that vicious cycle
Yeah.
and say to myself, no, this is not going to be the type of person I want to attract and I want to be with. But it was a lot of work that I needed. I needed to work on myself. And probably one of the things I had to do the most is for 2 years, I stayed single. For 2 years, I didn't date. I remember I called her my therapist, but she was more of a coach. She told me, now you're going to coast the ship and you're going to learn to be alone, eat alone, go out alone, sleep alone, learn to be alone and love yourself.
Yeah.
And I spent 2 years completely alone because I was jumping from one relationship to another. And that was the most freeing moment of my life, learning how to be alone and how to love myself, respect myself. And I tell people tell me, how do you stay out of a toxic relationship? Set your values and your standards and love yourself more, love yourself in a healthy way, to know that you're not going to accept and know your worth, and don't settle for, don't just settle out of the fear of being alone. If you do that, the moment you see a toxic relationship, you'll break it up and say, you know what, I wish you the best, not for me, goodbye. And that's it. So, yeah, go ahead.
And Nick, just let me say that we do want to address the people who are listening that are in toxic relationships, abusive relationships, and for whatever reason choose to stay. Let me introduce you to the most brave woman I've ever met in working with at domestic violence shelters. So Nick, I was showing some physical techniques, and she came up to me, she had a notepad, and she was taking notes, and she said, I just the last part of how to do a palm strike. So I told her, as she's writing it down, Nick, it's in complete gibberish. It's in complete gibberish. And I look at her and I say, hey, so what is this? She said, well, if my husband knew I was getting self-defense training and found a notebook of self-defense techniques, I would be in trouble. So I'd come up with my own language.
That's right there's a red flag for you to be like, if you got to create a language to.
Yes, but she stayed in it, Nick, because they were in a co-business together, and that's how she provided for her kids. So I looked at her and said, listen, I just want to say to you, you are one of the bravest women I know, because you've made a decision for your kids to stay in this. And again, we never want to say to a woman, to shame a woman for making a decision to stay in a relationship, because there's just a million reasons why women can tend to do that. We do want to give them good advice about what they need to think about, but we never want to shame them. So for this woman, I just looked at her and said, I just so commend you for coming here at great risk, because you want to protect yourself and the kids. And I know you're stuck in a relationship that you feel like you can't get out of, and please get help. Now, she's coming to domestic violence shelter. She is getting that input from the one who leads the shelter. So I just want to say, Nick, my heart goes out to any woman who absolutely feels trapped and yet doesn't give up and watches your videos to learn how to defend the kids herself. We just want to say to these listeners, you're our heroes. And COVID-19 has poured gasoline on all of this, right? So I'm so appreciative, Nick, that you would take time to be transparent like you just were. And second, that you'd make this a topic on your podcast. I think this is what people need to hear.
You know what? I think it is a very important topic. And I get this question asked all the time. Like I said, every situation is different, right? And especially when there's kids involved. I get it, right? I'm a firm believer. I was married for many years, and we got divorced, and some people told me, oh, just you have a kid, stay, you can't get divorced. And I'm like, my son felt that energy. There was an energy, and to stay in a relationship for the kid, I felt was wrong. And my ex-wife wasn't a bad person. We had grown apart. We weren't compatible in many ways. And, when you're 25 and you get married, and then you're 32, 33, you're not the same person. And it didn't work out. But I look at, I have a better relationship with my son now that we're divorced than when we were married. And I think it was better for all of us, both me and even my ex-wife, was better for us. And we have a better relationship now. It's civil, but for my son. And I had to take that decision. But I look back and I say, had I stayed today, I know I'd be probably pulling off the Band-Aid today, because I knew eventually it was going to happen, because I could see it. So I think that, because often I hear, well, I'm staying for the kids. And I'm like, your kids are going to feel that tension. And growing up in an environment where the parents are constantly fighting and swearing is worse for the children. You know what I mean? Because then they live in a fight or flight, a complete stress of what's going to happen tomorrow. And I've seen my mother and my father, I've seen my father explode to a point where you're a kid and I still remember those moments, and it's very, very traumatizing to grow up in that.
And so what we're saying, Nick, and I've heard you say this entire podcast, is each situation is complex. Don't just assume it's a cookie cutter, you need to leave or whatever. So have empathy for people, hear their story first. And I can't relate to that. I can't relate to being in that.
Don't judge them.
Yeah.
Don't shame them.
Yeah.
Don't make them feel less than you.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing. And I think one of the reasons why people come to me and they see me, as a good coach, is because I could sit and I could listen, and without judging, and be like, okay, where are you at right now? Yeah. How can we make it a little bit better?
Yeah.
Right. You can't go too hard, too drastic. And people need to build onto something sometimes. You need to build their confidence. You need to work on that as you're going. So, Tim, I think this is probably one of my favorite podcasts I've done. Honestly, yes, I think right here is golden and valuable information for women. So I want to thank you for coming on the show. Tim, where can they find you if they have any comments, any questions? Maybe they want to reach out to you. Where can they find you?
Yeah, so I would go to Biola University and just look up the Center for Marriage and Relationships. So Biola is BIOLA, and just do a Google search and then just type in Center for Marriage and Relationships, and you'll get our website, and you'll get all the resources. We do a podcast and get all the resources that you want. We'd love to pass those on.
Awesome.
And so on the links page,
yeah,
I'll give you the link as well.
Perfect. So we're going to put everything in the comment box. So the links are going to be there to the women. If you go and reach out, you're safe. You don't have to, be afraid. Like Tim would say, use another computer, use somewhere that nobody could track you. But reach out to Tim, reach out to me. We're there for you if you need anything, advice, questions, and don't be so hard on yourself if you haven't done anything for so long, but you want to, take one small step, and you owe that to yourself, right? So, Tim, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. I want to thank you so much. And if our listeners or our viewers have any comments or questions, or want to see any future episodes with me and Tim, we'll take them. Be more than happy to have Tim come back again. And I want to thank everybody for watching. Make sure to subscribe, to hit the bell, and stay safe.